Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be setting sail in our Tier 7 Soviet premium destroyer known as the Leningrad, in a Tier 7 standard battle on the map New Dawn. The purpose of this gameplay is for me to articulate my personal guide on the Leningrad, and the context for this is that my good friend Nick, who's been playing World of Warships for a short period of time now, recently picked up one of these as a premature Christmas gift from one of our colleagues from the TFC clan. And with Nick having spent a lot of time with Japanese cruisers but very little time with destroyers, it may be a bit of a foreign ship to play for him until he builds up his confidence. And perhaps this video will go to help boosting his confidence in sailing this ship and give him an idea of how to use it before he starts sailing it. Or at least that's what I hope, Nick, if you are watching this. So straight away we're going to be utilising one of the core strengths of Leningrad at the start and throughout this gameplay. And that is its base top speed of 43 knots. Joint top for Tier 7 destroyers alongside your Tier 7 standard Soviet counterpart, the Minsk. What this means is, in a push such as what we're making here towards the centre of the map, you do not necessarily need to give up one of your speed boost consumables in order to make an early push, and we're not going to need to here, because of the top speed conferred as standard. Our game plan is, by going in towards the centre, we can prevent the enemy destroyers, of which there are 4, we're expecting at least one of them to come this way, from gaining the central ground and being able to use it as a spotting mechanism or an attack launching mechanism for the rest of the game. Because I found on New Dawn, the team that controls the centre for a couple of well placed destroyers can prove to be the decisive factor throughout the match. Regardless, as we make our way in, we are conscious of the fact we are not a good brawler, because our turn circle radius at maximum speed of 690 metres and our 3.7 second rudder shift will not enable us to dodge torpedoes very well or dodge incoming fire at closer ranges very well. If anything, with our large profile as well, we are a very susceptible torpedo target, i.e. in terms of the long profile of the ship. So instead we're going to keep our distance and use our 5 singular 130mm cannon batteries to force the Ernst-Gader to go to smoke, and hopefully the Gajimada will even follow suit or sit in the Ernst-Gader smoke screen alongside them. Now we've had to go to smoke straight away as well, because what we appreciate is with our speed that is both a strength and a weakness, because it's very likely at the start of the game we will overextend from our teammates, and if you look at the minimap I'm aware of the fact I have overextended, I will not have support for the time being, and that's not ideal when you're being targeted by 8 ships. Instead we go into our smoke, we're using our speed boost to now sail out of it, and we've thrown our torpedoes towards the enemy smoke to try and hit them or push them out of their smoke, and in return we've gone to speed boost because we expect torpedoes to be on their way to our smoke screen. Because the general rule of thumb with smoke screens is that whilst they're very good at hiding your ship, they're not very good at preventing it from getting hit by torpedoes if the enemy's dedicated enough to throw torpedoes to what is essentially a torpedo magnet. The only way you're going to dodge the torpedoes is if you angle preemptively, which by the looks of things my opponents in their smoke screen may have done, or alternatively they sat right in the middle of the gap between the 2 torpedo salvos. With your 2 quadruple sets, which have a rather long 92-second reload, but we're going to time that effectively to try and contest the York and also what comes up behind it a little bit later. You can make good work of your torpedoes, you just have to be respectful of the fact they take time to reload. More on them in a bit. So what we're doing right now is waiting for those destroyers to come out of their smoke, the smoke to dissipate. Now the important part about this is we still have our speed boost active, because remember, speed boost consumables not only give you an enhanced top speed for a brief period of time, they also enhance your acceleration. And what that means in the case here is we're able to keep peering in and out from behind the landmass off to our starboard side in order to annoy the enemy destroyers in the centre. And the logic of this harassment being that eventually the enemy destroyers will give up trying to push further forward and they'll retreat southwards or out towards the southeast, which is what we want. Because what that means is our Mayhan, which is coming in from the northwest right now, can come into the centre, along with our Grudia Cesare, the Tier 5 Italian premium battleship. They can use the centre for their own means on our team, and it gives our team an informational and a positional advantage, or at least that's the plan. Now let's go back to the torpedoes, because with the enemy destroyers out of the way, we can now fire our torpedoes at, say, the enemy York, alternatively what's coming across the avenue behind the York, the Grudia Cesare, from a nice position, whereby we can cover that entire avenue and essentially, hopefully, pick up a torpedo hit on one of the 2 foes. Now it's very likely that the York is anticipating torpedoes, they may even have their Hydra up, but on the other hand, unless the Grillio is looking this way to potentially the Hydra spotted torpedoes, or just the torpedoes as they're spotted passing the York, they're not going to be too aware of the torpedoes that are on their way. And that is why the unique things about the Leningrad, it has 8km range torpedoes compared to the standard 4km torpedo range that you'll see on your Soviet destroyers up to this point. It gives it a unique trait in being able to act as a torpedo boat as well as a gunboat destroyer. and therefore you're able to bridge the gap between the likes of your Minsk counterpart and also the likes of the Akatsuki, the Japanese Tier 7 torpedo boat destroyer. Going back to our torpedoes, we can see that they have scored a hit on the Grulio, and a flood has been caused. Now hopefully we've timed this right so that way the Grulio is going to receive that flooding for a large period of time. It may even be enough to knock them out of the game, what with their health pool being rather low when our torpedo struck. The reason we're assuming that may be the case is because with that battleship having very little health available compared to its standard health pool, it's very likely they have had to use their damage control party once or twice in order to put fires out or floodings out in the past. That's the logic we're playing off of. Coming back to what we're doing, we're coming out into the open here using our smokescreen to shield the approach of our Krasny Krem, enabling them to potentially get a little bit closer to that enemy Cleveland to throw in their torpedoes. The idea being that Cleveland, as a Tier 6 American light cruiser, is a very dangerous ship to our destroyer, and we'd like our Krasny Krem to use their guns and their torpedoes to rip it to pieces. And here we overlead on the Gajamada, who's coming in, who takes a big hit off of our friendly Krasny Krem, and they instantly cut their speed and go to smoke. Didn't anticipate for that. You can't win every torpedo salvo you fire. But in turn, we're now going to move out of our smoke and use our threat as a destroyer to distract the Cleveland from the Krasny Krem. This will sound a little bit odd, exposing ourselves to one of the most dangerous cruisers that we can face, but the logic is if we point enough distance and angle appropriately, while the Cleveland having armour piercing loaded to try and sit at our Krasny Krem, they'll be so focused on us that they're not going to see the torpedoes that our Krasny Krem's already fired at them, and that will put them out of the game. And indeed, it does. Now with them out of the way and the Liquidator picked up on the Grulio from earlier who we caused to flood to death, we're now going to use our speed to dodge underneath the Bleacher-Visca's shells at over 10 km range, whereby the Bleacher-Visca can prove a very dangerous threat at longer ranges with their guns. Didn't take too much damage there. And now we need to make a decision. Do we pursue the enemy destroyers and push towards their cap? Or do we take the alternative approach of reconsolidating the centre? Now my decision's made for me very shortly, because looking at the teams we can see that we're actually down 2 ships. We've lost 6, the enemy team's lost 4. So the logic needs to be that we need to try and conserve positions on the map, prevent the enemy team from being able to encircle our 6 remaining ships in 3 separate pockets, because look how we're grouped up on the minimap. You've got some ships up in the northwest, you've got some ships up in the north from the centre, and then you've got myself and the New Mexico out in the southeast. We can't afford to become too distant from our team. So by going back towards the centre, we're also going to act as a means of spotting the Gajamada for a brief period of time, catching them as they were leaving their smoke. That's what we're hoping to do, but also by getting back into the centre, we stay relevant to the entirety of the game, not just one small bit of the map. We're putting a nice set of salvos there against the Gajamada, putting them on a rather critical health state as well, which means that if we do need to go head to head and brawl with them, we've now got a clear-cut advantage because we've got the health advantage, and they cannot use their torpedoes against us because they're deep water torpedoes, which are ineffective against destroyers, a standard rule of thumb for Pan-Asian DDs. Now breaking away from the Bleacher-Visca, we're waiting for our concealment to go back to normal, i.e. our detectability by sea, being a respectable 7.3 kilometers as standard, and then we throw our torpedoes towards the Bleacher-Visca. And for those wondering, how do I read that? Well, my logic is the Bleacher-Visca is probably going to try and torpedo our New Mexico shortly when they see them, or at least harass them with their guns. And to do that, the Bleacher-Visca needs to pull range to not be spotted, and therefore sail westwards. But the Bleacher-Visca player may be thinking to themselves, well, I need to cut off the Leningrad that's going through the centre. They don't know that we're not going through the centre right now, we're waiting on the periphery. So that way, they would proceed that way, westwards or northwestwards, to try and cut us off. And in turn, what we're expecting is they may drift into the range of our 8 km torpedoes. The rightmost set. We'll just have to wait and find out. In the meantime, we're getting ready to shoot at this enemy Omaha. Now at the moment, we're the only ones spotting them. But then we trigger our smoke screen because what we're hoping is they'll either fire back at us firing at them, which will cause them to be spotted through our smoke. What are the smoke mechanics as they work these days? You have a detectability range after firing in smoke, and that works the reverse way outside of the smoke screen. Alternatively, they'll be spotted by a Fubuki up in the north, and that's what's happening here. We did take the Bleacher-Visca out with the torpedo from earlier, as we discussed, and what we can see here is against the light armour of an enemy cruiser such as the Omaha, the Tier 5 ship, but this also extends up to Tier 6 and Tier 7 cruisers. Your armour piercing is extremely effective when they give you a flat broadside, being able to citadel for a maximum of 2,500 damage per citadel, and that means you can make short work of the likes of the Omaha. Now as we finish them off for what is our 3rd kill with this final salvo, we decide to reverse just a little bit because we expect the Omaha's 5.5 km torpedoes may come into the leading edge of our smoke screen because they did throw up a lot of broadside and that would indicate a torpedo run. So having read that, the torpedoes ran out of range just on the edge of our smoke, and now we need to go deal with the Gajamada because what we can see now is we have taken the initiative in creating those encirclement pockets for our team to abuse against the enemy team. The Gadget is in a smokescreen off to our port side right now behind two landmasses. We would expect they'll be trying to torpedo our New Mexico. Now, if they're trying to torpedo our New Mexico, that means that their torpedo launchers and their guns must be pointed eastwards. So let's use our speed and even implement our speed boost to make this a little bit faster to come around on their western side before we get spotted through the centre, timing this just right to avoid being spotted by the Queen Elizabeth, which is almost able to spot us here, as we can see on the mini-map. And that's why we love the concealment of this ship as standard. And let's get behind that Gadget Matter before it can escape its smokescreen and celebrate the fact that it may be able to take out New Mexico. And as we come around, our guns are already set up and we caught them. Now note the turrets on the Gadget Matter are pointed the completely wrong way, and as they try to turn their turrets, we only need one more salvo to finish them off. They're never going to be able to return fire. That's the enemy destroyer out of the game, our 4th kill. Now unfortunately we did lose our New Mexico in that engagement. It's not ideal, but we'll make the most of it. We're still in a 3 versus 3, so it's not as though our teams are at a major disadvantage. But we have to note that our health pool is crippled, and that's why we're very grateful for the fact we've got Survivability Expert, otherwise we would be close to death right now. And in general, our ships are distributed, but the enemy team's ships appear to be distributed, so we're in a rather even situation. The enemy team's got a Belfast that seems to have disappeared off towards the southwest of the map, their Queen Elizabeth is charging in towards our capture point, and the Shiratsu is nowhere to be seen. Now the Shiratsu is a key threat because they've got very strong concealment compared to our own ship, which means they can get quite close and torpedo us through stealth. But more importantly, we need to get this Queen Elizabeth out of the game. At this point, we're going to start to bring to bear our firepower of high explosives, something we haven't really talked about so far. Now, our 4.5 second reload with basic firing training enabled, and the fact that we can cause our fire chance to go up to a maximum of 11%, we have a base of 8%, we increase that by 2% using the Demolition Expert Captain skill, and then we increase it a further percentage point through the usage of flags. We've got a very strong chance of being able to cause fires on our opponents. And in setting fires on enemy battleships in particular, we can bleed down their health. That's not to say they can't just heal all the fire damage up immediately, which they can. But the logic we're taking here is the fact that in order for them to put the fire out, they'll need to use up their damage control party consumable, and if they want to heal it, they need to use up a heal. We'll get rid of their resources now, rather than later on when they've got them available to use in that clutch firefight. So as we gradually make our way up towards the cap at this point, you'll note that we're slowing, and the reason we're slowing is because we want to use our Fubuki to provide the spotting for us, and we're, pardon me, going to go to a smoke screen here to drop tons and tons of shells on that Queen Elizabeth until they burn. Of course, we are relying on the fact that we haven't said anything to our Fubuki, so we're hoping to get the fires before the Fubuki is going to go behind the landmass up to the north of us, at which point the Queen Elizabeth and the Fubuki will have the landmass blocking vision of one another. But we'll see what we can do. And we have caused 2 fires in one of our salvos here, so let's work to effect. Now unfortunately, the two lose sight of each other a little bit sooner than we would have liked, but that's the way it is. So what we're going to start doing now is figuring what our next step will be. We've also got to be aware of the fact that the Shiratsu could come at any point either off to what would be our port side or to our rear and torpedo the smokescreen or spot us out, and the Belfast could be hot on their heels to support them. We don't know where those ships are, so we can't afford to stay stagnant for too long. But as we gradually poke our nose out of our smoke screen here, we're not spotted, which means the Shiratsu's either got to be coming from behind us, or alternatively, they've got to be so far away up in the north as not to see us, or concealed behind the landmass off to what would be our port side. And soon enough, they're very briefly spotted in coming up to the south of the Queen Elizabeth on their team, which means they're going to support them and take on the Fubuki most likely, although we can't rule out 10km torpedoes coming our way. So in return now, with our Fubuki having to go to smoke, having been spotted by the Queen Elizabeth and opened fire upon, we are now going to use our speed and the great range of our guns, especially with the fact we had advanced firing training active on this ship, in order to annoy the Queen Elizabeth and get their attention, and perhaps even get the attention of the Shiratsu. Because when you've got great speed, a decent profile in terms of how thin this ship is, despite its long length profile, and the fact that you've still got some health remaining, and good firing guns for long distances, you can really pose a problem that a battleship with, say, a 30-second reload and guns which have weaker muzzle velocities by comparison, it can't deal with that threat as easily unless it gets a very well-led shot, or salvo. So here we're tossing the shells in, and for reference, your maximum range with advanced firing training is 13.9 kilometers. We'll just keep throwing in the shells and hope to pick up another fire, because that Queen Elizabeth has had to put out a considerable number of fires. Doesn't look as though it's going to be the case, however, and we're waiting for the Shiratsu to be triggered into shooting us. Because because depending on what range they're at, we may try to open fire on them, and there they go, they open fire on us. But our speed is enabling us to just dodge the incoming fire through pure straight line speed alone. But we're now starting to angle away from these ships, just in case they throw in a return salvo. We can turn away and minimise the profile of our ship that's exposed to the incoming high explosive from the Shiratsuyu. And it's worked so far with 2 salvos being dodged. In the meantime, the Shiratsuyu is closing towards our Fubuki, and what that means is that when they're spotted, it's very likely that the Queen Elizabeth and the Shiratsuyu will both turn their attention towards our friendly destroyer. Which is unfortunate because our Fubuki does a brilliant job here of torpedoing the Queen Elizabeth, but in return they lose almost all of their health. Which means now the Shiratsuyu has a free reign to essentially gun down our Fubuki, as they almost do there. So as a result, what we decide to do at this point is get a little bit closer to the Shiratsuyu, so as they come out behind the landmass onto our port side, they'll still be spotted, having fired, and I believe it's 20 seconds have not yet expired before their concealment is reset to their rather good concealment level. I can't remember what the maximum on that ship is, but I know it's better than the Leningrad, or at least our usage of the Leningrad. But what's nice about the fire rate on the Leningrad and its ability to hit even destroyers at longer ranges is look at how we've equalised this fight. When we went in, we had roughly 6,000 health, the Shiratsuyu had roughly 9,000 health from what we recall. It's now down to them having just shy of 6,000 health, us having just shy of 5,000 health, over the course of a couple of salvos. That means you can very quickly equalise in the long range destroyer engagements, and you can use your speed and your manoeuvrability to dodge the return fire. Now of course we can't chase down the Shiratsuyu because they're much more well concealed than us, and that means they would see us from a mile away and they'd be able to throw torpedoes our way and get their guns ready to be able to get in a position where if they can't knock us out outright, they can get us down to our last sliver of health. But what we can do is be now a ever-present threat around our cap. We have to consider the Belfast is coming up this way from the south, they're coming through the centre, and very shortly our Fubuki does get spotted by the Belfast. Unfortunately that is going to spell their doom. And in the meantime we can't expect too much assistance from our Iron Duke. Not a criticism, their game plan's been to push towards the enemy cap, which is fair enough on them. It means that the enemy team cannot build up points off of their own base anymore. They have to go for kills, or alternatively cap us out completely, or go back and deal with the Iron Duke. A number of options, but the problem is the Iron Duke's still got quite a bit of health, or at least we'd assume so, and can be quite a threat to the enemy cruiser in particular. So we're going to have to defend our capture point for a bit. Now the unfortunate nature of this is that whilst we'd love to bring our torpedoes onto target, we can't because our Fubuki sinking wreck is blocking the entry avenue of the Belfast. And we're being spotted here by the Shiratsuyu, who is using their superior concealment to their advantage. So in return what we have to do is play the long range game and go to guns. Because we do have the ability to duke incoming fire and in return dish out damage and dish out the reset and prevent the enemy team from capturing. Because remember, it's going to be 2 enemy ships capturing. So the cap rate is going to be 1.5 minutes rather than the full 3 minutes. We've thrown our torpedoes in, we're not expecting those to hit. What we're expecting is they'll force the Belfast to go down a certain path, and they're quite easy to dodge what with their limited top speed of 60 knots. And as a result of that, once the Belfast is forced to go on a path through the torpedoes, you could say through the gate as they're about to, we can open fire and guarantee hits. We're sitting stationary briefly, so that way we're getting a nice position to open fire, and now we're building up our speed rapidly once more to dodge the incoming fire from their main batteries. Noting that we've set 2 fires, which means it's very likely that the Belfast is going to have to put those fires out, and in turn that means we can later on, when we come around for another set of salvos, once their fire extinguisher consumable has exhausted, we can use our 11% fire chance to do more damage. And we're even here throwing in some armour piercing to play about with their broadside, hopefully do a bit of damage. When our final high explosive salvo there before they disappeared, we couldn't see them behind the landmass, we scored another fire, and they can't put that fire out, so now they're bleeding even more health, and that puts the Belfast in a critical situation whereby, despite their advantage as a cruiser in being able to take us out, because we've kept to longer ranges and thwarted their incoming fire in terms of being able to hit us, that Belfast is only 1 or 2 salvos away from death. Of course, the Shiratsuyu is a problem, because they're still in that cap, and it's very unlikely we're going to be able to get a clean hit on them. But if we can get rid of one of the enemy ships, then that will reset the cap enough, or at least in our humble judgment, it will reset the cap enough to enable our Iron Duke to cap out. Alternatively, it will reset the points balance enough so that way we have the winning points lead for the rest of the game. And having hit the Belfast once more, we only need to hit with 1 more salvo and they're out the game, and that's our Kraken. And that means now with an 80-point lead advantage, and with only 50 seconds left on the game, the enemy team cannot win unless they come after us, and take us out, and then potentially the Iron Duke as well. Because if the Shiratsu leaves its cap, if the Shiratsu leaves our cap, I should say, then that means that we start gaining a couple of points every few seconds, and that puts us above the ability for the Shiratsu to claim back the lead through taking us out, and vice versa. They'd have to go down and take out our Iron Duke in the space of less than 30 seconds now, which isn't possible even for the likes of a Shiratsu or even for the likes of a Leningrad with its speed. And here we're just wiggling about. We're trying to provide a nice target for the Shiratsu to come after, relying on our top speed and our manoeuvrability to be able to dodge the incoming fire. But we can see that the Shiratsu has taken a hidden position within our cap because we're not being spotted, and now we just wait for the game to end because this is our win. We've secured it as a team, and there we go. A rather close battle, but we pulled through in the end. And we can see that our battle performance amounted to a grand total of 145,937 HP of damage. In that we picked up 4 achievements. One standard achievement in the form of a liquidator, whereby we caused flood into an enemy ship and destroyed it. The damage caused by the flooding exceeding 40% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool. That was on the enemy's Gaudio Caesar. And we also picked up 3 heroic achievements. The first, the Confederate, for damaging at least 6 enemy ships, whereby the damage caused to each ship must exceed 20% of their normal health pool. The Kraken Unleash, for destroying 5 or more enemy ships in a single battle. And the High Caliber, for damaging at least 4 enemy ships, whereby the damage caused must exceed 30% of the total health pool of all the ships in the enemy team. Looking at the team score, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 2,518. What this goes to show is that you can effectively carry a team across the finish line in the Leningrad, but do not overestimate your capabilities to carry a team. Because what is more interesting to note over the course of this gameplay is that despite our independence during our initial push, as the game went on, we became more reliant on utilising the circumstances and situations our teammates had put themselves in to great effect for the overall outcome of the match. A key example of this would be our Fubuki in trying to defend our base, whereby we used their position as spotter of the Queen Elizabeth to be able to set multiple fires on the enemy battleship. And as the two got closer and closer together and we had to effectively come out of our smokescreen to reverse the favour, it should be noted that the Fubuki continued to spot for us against the Queen Elizabeth until the death of the Queen Elizabeth, and when the Fubuki had to retreat because of the Shiratsu's firepower. But even in that space, the Fubuki put the Shiratsu at a point where they would be spotted for us to be able to use our guns effectively. Therefore, one individual is not greater than the sum of the team, but the Leningrad, as sailed by an individual, can go a good distance to helping the team to victory. Coming on to our detailed report, we have 2 key items to note here. The first is the usage of other damage within the damage caused category, other referring to fires and floodings, or bleed damage as I like to call it, whereby our fires attributed 21,821 and our floodings attributed 18,734. The idea behind this is that whilst the guns and the torpedoes themselves of the Leningrad are rather powerful, it's the ability to be able to use the knock-on bleed effect of these weapons to your advantage that's going to enable you to rack up large chunks of damage and eliminate foes from the game. We can particularly refer to the instances of being able to set the singular flood on the enemy's Gaudio Caesar, which took them out of the game, and later on when we set the multiple fires on the enemy Queen Elizabeth and also the Belfast right at the end, which gave us the advantage in the final confrontation against that very menacing Tier 7 British premium cruiser. The other item to note here is the fact that if we look at our distance travelled, we can see that we travelled a total distance in the 20-minute game of 91.63 kilometres. The idea of this being to keep in mind that you can use your speed in general, or your speed via your speed boost, to cover a lot of ground over the course of a match. So do not always think that you need to confine yourself in the Leningrad to one particular region of the battlefield. As the game develops, reposition yourself accordingly, whether that be just a short distance away or a long distance away. The Leningrad can get there faster than most. And finally, coming on to our credits and experience earned, we can see that Leningrad is quite the earner with a premium account and the appropriate flags mounted, with us taking away 604,501 silver credits and 22,022 commander experience after all additions and deductions were applied. Now normally at this point I would begin to wrap up the video with a final conclusion of what we discussed today, but because this video is to act as a guide just as much as it is a gameplay analysis, I'm going to go into the upgrades, captain skills and flags I like to use on the Leningrad. If we start with our upgrades, reading from left to right on screen, the first one in slot 1 is Main Armaments Modification 1. This increases the survivability and accelerates the repairs of your main battery and torpedo tubes. whereby the net effect is a 20% reduction to the risk of these items becoming incapacitated, i.e. knocked out, a plus 50% to the survivability of said items, and a drop in 20% of the repair time of these items, meaning that when your turrets, or alternatively your torpedo tubes, are knocked out, they come back faster without the need for you to consult your damage control party consumable potentially, and on top of that there's a lower chance of these items being knocked out in the first place. In our next slot we have Propulsion Modification 1, which provides us for a 20% increase to our engine survivability and also accelerates our engine repairs by 20%. The logic here being that in a destroyer typically you always want to keep moving when you're under fire to minimise the likelihood of you being hit. And with the Leningrad with its impressive firing range, you want to be able to take hits to your ship but not have to lose your engine every 5 seconds, that way you become dead in the water, or alternatively sail at a much slower speed compared to what you may have wanted in that given engagement. So we want to try and keep our engine alive for as long as possible, and when it does get knocked out we can repair it as quickly as possible. The reason I haven't gone for Steering Gears Modification 1, which provides the same effects but to your rudder, is that in short, whilst having the ability to continuously steer is very useful in an engagement, because if you lose your steering you can no longer control the rudder of your ship, or you control it at a reduced rate with Last Stand active, the ability to steer is less valuable, especially at longer ranges, compared to your ability to keep moving, or at least in my experience. Now there will be circumstances where it's quite the opposite, i.e. if you're close to a landmass, you accidentally steer into the landmass of no fault of your own because you haven't got your steering gears available. But in general, I believe it's the idea of being able to keep your speed up and keep moving, perhaps unpredictably once your steering gears have been knocked out, that gives you the survivability factor, not your ability to preserve your steering, but potentially lose your engine power. In slot 3, we have Aiming Systems Modification 1, which increases the firing accuracy of our main battery and also accelerates the traverse speed of our torpedo tubes. Now the logic behind this is that the dispersion of the Leningrad's guns is rather respectable as is, but with maximum range conferred as of advanced firing training, either at 13.9 km range, and this module equipped, you'll have a dispersion of 111 metres at maximum range, which means that your shells are rather accurate. And if you're engaging foes at distances of less than 10 kilometres, you can expect that out of the 5 shells you fire, you've got a very high chance of all 5 landing, if not say 3 or 4, as we saw time and time again in today's gameplay. It increases the potency, I personally feel, of you being able to land successful salvo after salvo and wear down your foes rather rapidly with your guns. And finally, coming on to slot 4, we have selected Propulsion Modification 2, which reduces the time for us to reach full power of our engines by 50%. The logic behind this being that we improve our ability to go from a stationary position to a moving position by 50%, and therefore can get to our top speed faster through that initial acceleration. I should point out that the actual acceleration benefit only applies from stationary, i.e. 0 knots, to 6 knots, and it does not improve your acceleration in reverse. But for us to be able to get to our maximum engine power faster, in turn confers the benefit of being able to move out of a position faster, particularly when we're stuck in a smoke screen. And if you combine that with the speed boost consumable, you get phenomenal acceleration out of the Leningrad. The reason we didn't go with Steering Gears Modification 2, which may seem like a good idea, was the fact it drops your rudder shift time by 20% and would make you more competitive in those closer range engagements against enemy destroyers, is that if anything, we're trying to eradicate a weakness of the Leningrad with that modification. We're not trying to improve a key strength of the ship already and make it more noticeable on the ship. Minus 20% to your rudder shift time, if anything, is combating against the difficulty you'll have in those close range engagements, not conferring a net benefit to your ship in what it can do best, alternatively what it does well but can do even better. Or at least that's the way I look at it. We now come on to captain skills, in which I'll be reading from tier 1 downwards, and I'll be reading out the captain skills in the order in which I recommend you unlock them, rather than just reading from left to right. We begin on line 1 with Priority Target, which is the first skill I recommend you get, simply because it tells you when you are being targeted how many ships are targeting you, rather than you just seeing a spotted indicator up in the top of your screen and you don't know what's actually about to shoot at you. The net effect of this is that if you're sailing in a straight line and opening fire on enemy ships and being spotted, you can afford not to worry about manoeuvring or cutting your speed to juke incoming fire if you know nobody's targeting you at that given point in time. And if you really feel cheeky, you can even resort to cutting your speed completely and sitting out in the open stationary and just raining down fire, and then picking up your engine speed and starting to change direction when your foe starts targeting you and opens fire. It provides you with a buffer essentially in knowing when you're about to receive incoming shell fire, and you can start to react towards it accordingly. Moving on to Tier 2, we have Last Stand, which enables you to still be able to use your engine or your steering gears even when they're incapacitated, but they operate with a penalty. Now, the logic behind having this is the fact that if you get yourself into an adverse situation, such as you get ambushed by a dangerous cruiser and you lose your engine, you're still able to pull distance rather than lose all your speed and remain too close to the cruiser to become unspotted. At this point, it increases your survivability, but more so if you do lose your engine or your steering gears when you're trying to harass someone at long range, you still got the ability to use them and provide that continuous harassment and still be unpredictable in your movement path. So it means that losing your steering or your engine is not the be-all and end-all of your life in the ship. You can keep on being effective for a much longer period of time. We then have basic firing training in Tier 3, which will drop the reload time on your 130mm main batteries by 10%, down from 5 seconds to 4.5 seconds, and it also confers a boost of 20% to your average damage per second to your AA guns. But considering that the AA in general on the Leningrad isn't going to be winning any favours, the focus here is on your ability to pump out more main battery shells per minute, increasing your damage per minute as a result. We then move down to Tier 4 and select Advanced Firing Training. This will confer a 20% firing range buff to our main battery guns, whereby their calibre falls underneath the limit of 139mm, and on top of that our AA defence firing range is also boosted by 20%. But again, our focus here is on the increased range to our main batteries, allowing us to open fire up to a distance of 13.9km, making us a very difficult target for bigger ships to hit at such an extreme range, when we can use our speed and manoeuvrability to juke the incoming shots in return. We then come back down to Tier 3 and pick Demolition Expert, whereby this will boost our fire chance on our main battery shells, high explosive, by 2%, increasing the likelihood over the course of the game as us setting fires and therefore being able to do more fire damage over the course of the game. Now moving sideways to pick up Superintendent, this will give you one additional charge to all of your consumables as mounted on the ship, so our smokescreen generator and our speed boost in this instance. The logic here being that as the game goes on and you use up your consumables, you'll have one additional one you can use in the late game, and this could make the difference between you surviving and dying in a rather difficult situation and potentially clutching the game for your team. And for our final captain skill, again going sideways, we pick up Survivability Expert, which confers a HP pool bonus of plus 350 for each ship tier, or in terms of Leningrad, with it being Tier 7, that's an additional 2,450 health. In turn, if you talk about a destroyer versus destroyer engagement, this means that we can absorb one additional salvo from the Tier 7 American Sims before we go down. Perhaps this will keep us alive in those close quarters engagements where literally a salvo is going to make the difference between life and death. And this also means that if you do end up being shot at by an enemy cruiser and they're rather accurate in their fire, you may be able to absorb a couple more hits, whereas you may not have if you do not have Survivability Expert, allowing you to get away with potentially making mistakes every so often. But again, it's only a small health pool boost, not a massive one, so I would not over rely on it. It's a nice to have. We now come on to the signal flags which we are using. We're going to start at the top in the combat category and make our way down, reading from left to right where needs be. In the top row we have India X-Ray, which is a flag which provides us with an increased fire chance for artillery shells of 0.5%. The negative effect is that this increases our risk of magazine detonation by 5%, but we'll mitigate that shortly. We then have Victor Lima, which again increases the fire chance of our high explosive shells by 0.5%, so therefore we get the net overall high explosive fire chance of 11%. And this also increases our chances of causing flooding with our torpedoes by 4%. We mitigate the likelihood of our detonation thanks to the India X-ray flags by using the Juliet Charlie flags in the second row, whereby this reduces our detonation chance to purely 0, regardless of any other modifiers which have been applied to the ship, such as the India X-ray flag. We now come down to the third row of signals and therefore the economic types, whereby all of these are going to be used to maximise our earnings from already improved earnings on a premium ship. We start with Zulu, which increases the number of credits we earn by 20%, Then Equal Speed Charlie London, which boosts our experience earned by 50% in a given battle. Zulu Hotel, which increases our commander experience earned by a further 50%. And finally Papa Papa, which increases our free experience earned by 300% in a given match. On the full throw of these special signals, we utilise Dragon Flags, which increase our commander experience earned for a given battle by a further 333%. But if we did not have these available, then as a result we would use the Sierra Mike flag from the combat signals in order to increase our ship speed by a further 5%. The logic being here, we'll get to places faster, although we have to be wary of the fact that we have got the likelihood to collide with land masses faster and potentially overextend into positions faster. And that just about wraps things up for my guide to the Leningrad, whereby this Tier 7 Soviet premium destroyer is unique in the fact that unlike her like-for-like Tier Soviet counterpart the Minsk, she gets rather potent torpedoes, which, with their 8 km range, can pose a threat over the course of a game which is hidden away from the enemy simply because those torpedoes can be fired outside of her detectability. And as those torpedoes creep towards their opponents, they'll do significant damage if they strike, and if they can cause flooding, it's only going to lead to irrecoverable consequences. But then again, let's not forget the artillery pieces on this ship, that despite their slow turning circle and the need to expose a significant broadside to the ship to fire all 5 of them, they can do a good amount of damage, whether it be at closer ranges against enemy destroyers or cruisers, or alternatively at long distance, where you're particularly harassing enemy battleships and trying to set fires. That means you can really mix things up over the course of the game, which embodies this hybrid nature of the destroyer, and means that over the course of a given match, she can prove to be highly capable. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.